Hello and welcome to 52 Weeks. This week we're going to continue the discussion of Chapter 5, Housing, and in this chapter I've split it up into 6 segments to make it a little bit easier to digest. That was looking at the introduction, number 2, the building typology, number 3, building statistics, number 4, issues in housing, number 5, observations, and number 6, building blocks of Harrisburg. The comprehensive plan recommends immediate development of a detailed citywide housing reinvestment strategy. So we're looking at areas of the downtown, uptown, and on Allison Hill. So these are things where we can focus on the spatial structure of what's already there and develop that. So that's why this comp plan is important in understanding the bones, the structure of the city. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We follow what's already been set up and we actually add to it. And it needs to have, again, detailed citywide. This is all the agencies coming together, the policies set forth, and everybody's following. This is the structure we're going to do. This actually helps in planning long term. With strategic plans, you can go out and look for grant funds because there's a logic to the process and show where the investment's going to be put in and then the long-term return. We should all be looking at this in long-term gains in investment, not the short-term flipping. We talked about this before in flipping houses. We don't get into the mindset of a home and garden channel of let's dump in money and flip houses and make money this way. That's a transactional mindset that extracts wealth out of the neighborhoods. If you're connected in a city and are buying into a property, always consider the long-term investment, how long it's going to take to get to building the block up and working with residents and building with community groups. This should be looking at this 4 C's. That's communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity. Working in this mindset, collective effort, that's going to help bring all this together. The city's neighborhoods have seen little new construction over the past decades. Rarely are new whole buildings built into these highly uniform historic environments. So we look at where these 2 areas are. These are dense areas and there's historic designations. So that takes a different type of design than areas that are completely open and have large areas of space. That comes with, again, a caveat of who's building this housing and is it at the same standard as the housing that's across the street. So if you have a block that's one side of the street is highly historic and then you put up new housing on a completely blank area, this is area of 3rd Street that you have, and you put new housing on that is beyond the standard that you could achieve back in the 1900s to 1930s, there's going to be a difference. And you don't want to replicate what's across the street. You should be looking at being truthful to the materials, being truthful to stick built, and how that addresses the issue of the city and city streetscape. And we build on the public realm. So this is all tied in together. Large areas between 3rd and 7th Streets were subject to demolition in the 1960s and 70s. This area offers opportunities to introduce new housing types and community structures to the city. That's a huge benefit in this larger area. And what I would look at, it'd be great to show a graphic at some point, is how long all this land sat vacant. That would be the next thing in developing this land database that we're working on, is seeing how long land has been sat on by whom and how many owners, because then it shows you the disinvestment that people have got into this thinking they can get this property. This is our mindset from the 80s and 90s in real estate economics. Sadly, we're learning how detrimental that has been. We should have saw that early on, but trying to push up against this, and we've got the home builders, we got the realtors, all of this pushing in. These are large lobbies in effect pushing in on these things. So this is a really hard, strong thing to be going up against. And the areas of Paxton Creek Basin and Central Allison Hill served as industrial and manufacturing zones from the 19th and middle 20th centuries. Since the land is no longer in demand for new industry, it should be repositioned to serve other uses integrated into new ecological buffers. So this is these zones that happen and try to show as looking and working with a green space plan that would be helpful to tie these together. So we've got, as called for in Capital Region Water's 2016 Green Infrastructure Plan, providing enhanced stormwater management capabilities and recreational opportunities. These areas require special area plans to produce successful areas of contemporary, harmonious development integrated into the city. So when we look at the idea of developmental pressures, we have to figure out how do we address that in the comp plan. So here's a quote out of the comp plan. When the pressure for new development increases, the comprehensive plan, residential design guidelines, and an affordable housing ordinance can ensure that careful introduction of new housing types in historic neighborhoods strengthen the character of place through adherence to proportion, material, and massing. So you really need 3 things that will help focus this. This is what the Harrisburg Planning Commission needs to set up, and working with the City Council, working with the City Bureau of Planning, all these agencies, they need to take the comprehensive plan, residential design guidelines, and an affordable housing ordinance. And one of the things that can help with that is the form-based codes, form-based zoning that will pull and knit those 3 things together. So the three things that we need is the comprehensive plan, which we have. It's in draft form. We have a residential design guidelines and an affordable housing ordinance. Those last two, the residential design guidelines and affordable housing ordinance, can be worked on through the Harrisburg City Planning Commission and also an advisory council. We got city council, but we can have an residence advisory council that would help to pull this together, looking maybe if you get the 15 wards and 28 precincts coming together, looking at the overall pieces from the comp plan and work out an affordable housing ordinance. All three documents are necessary to steward sound reinvestment in the city's residential neighborhoods. This starts to guard against this free will development. Any development is good development. We should stop right now. We should be really looking at the systems approach of this, having our policy placed in here so that we know where we want to develop and develop well, so that we don't have what we see in other cities go rampant, which is gentrification and displacement. This is going to happen if we don't go ahead and put down some constraints. We have to look at this and go through this slowly. Again, I've said the land grab is out there. This is going to continue to happen. People are going to sit on properties, buy them up. The property values are going to increase, and we're going to start pushing people out somewhere else. We can work this together as a residents and also working with our city council, build this process that we have. We haven't done this process in ages. We left it up to our officials. That has never changed, and this needs to change now for the next decade so that we ensure dignified housing, stable housing, and housing units that are livable and that makes our city worth living for, that we actually want to take pride in our city and love being here. So that's what we should be focused on as residents. So we look at this, properly developed guidelines can streamline the process of reinvestment, allows all investment to be subject to a consistent administrative approval process. We don't have that currently. HARB, the Harrisburg Architectural Review Board, there's the Planning Commission and zoning. These are all systems that are out there, but they're not really looking at this housing and really reinvestment that focuses on the residents that are here. Again, going back to people and place, let's focus on that, and the investment, the economics will follow if we get this formula right. This is not rocket science. Achieving sustainable, well-maintained houses and neighborhoods emerges as the primary goal of the comprehensive plan. We're trying to build a sustainable, well-maintained houses, so it's a constant fixing that happens, taking care of this, and our neighborhoods start to knit back together. We rebuild and reinvest. This is a long-term goal. This is not a flipping of a house and flipping these things quickly, because that runs rampant. Again, extraction of wealth out of neighborhoods and extraction of wealth out of parcels. We've got to look at this long-term. It's not that we can't make money and invest, but it's got to be done right, and thinking about the neighbors that are around your block or who else owns the properties around you. That's the thinking we need to have. It's long-term thinking. New redevelopment areas have potential to provide new housing types, and simultaneously, through progressive design and sustainability guidelines, express Harrisburg as an innovative city. We have this potential now in the next 10 years to look at Harrisburg as an innovative city. We can redo and fix some of these structural and systemic issues that we have all throughout our systems and get it working for the residents who choose to live here, the new next generation that's moving through the schools, looking at it for, I've always said this, the 2031 person who was going into kindergarten last fall and emerges as a graduate in 2031. What does that person see as Harrisburg? This is going to be critical in the next decade. Historic development. Again, looking at the first half of the 20th century, Harrisburg was widely celebrated as one of the most beautiful and progressive cities in the country. Imagine that. Back at the first half of the 20th century, Harrisburg was on the map. I tell students that all the time. We had a presence in the national level, and now that has subsided as we get more notoriety through things that our state and local government. It hits more of a negative news, and that's why we make the papers rather than something positive. The combined City Beautiful era improvements of the Capitol complex with Warren Manning's citywide parks and infrastructure plan transformed Harrisburg from a gritty industrial city to an urban jewel. We have that jewel that's hidden that we can actually build on. The structure's there, the framework's there. We can do this. The Manning Plan, circa 1900, enjoys continued widespread public endorsement and appreciation for the urban structures that it established. This again is critical as the bones are there and we can work from them and build upon them. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're going to look at what we have, what we've lost, what we've forgotten about, and we've got to remember to treat people right in the process of engaging all of those who are coming to the table and need to be at the table for this next decade. That is extremely important. Given the overwhelming influence of the Manning Plan, structuring the form, the present-day Harrisburg, it provides common point of reference upon which to begin a dialogue on the purpose and goals of the city's 2016 Comprehensive Plan, particularly in the terms of public space and urban form, and continually hitting the idea this is important. This is in 2016. We're now 3 years into this because of things going off the rails, off the track. It shows you how important it is that we stick with this and get to something that's a framework for the next decade. For 2020, we start in a very good trajectory focused on all of these things in the comp plan. So the importance of that trajectory also goes back to why we're even looking at this and why the comp plan continues to go back to the City Beautiful era. So these City Beautiful era improvements are results of the city's first comprehensive planning. The physical structure it established remains in place and still articulates the dominant character of the city through such grand gestures as Riverfront Park, Greenbelt, including Wildwood Park and State Street. So these are long-lasting legacies that we continue to talk about. Harrisburg's distinctive structure and housing areas are described in detail in the land use chapter. The city experienced rapid growth until the 1930s, at which point most of the city's housing stock was built. Structure of housing stock in the city was very clear. Older row housing surrounds the downtown core. First ring suburb areas of detached houses are found in the north and the east edge of the city. Large areas of duplex housing fill in between the row houses and detached houses. Few houses have been added to these areas since the 1930s. Reflecting the visible change in housing type, residential areas are defined as pre-1900, which is pre-City Beautiful movement, and post-1900. Most remaining pre-1900 housing stock are row houses, that is zero lot line housing that has no front or side yard. Thank you for listening this week. We'll continue next week within Chapter 5, Housing. Take care. Thanks.